All right, Adam. Well, it's game preview time. The Buffs week 11, and again, we said it so many times, but I can't believe we're in week 11. This regular season's almost over, but week 11 and a much more meaningful football game than we're used to this time of year. And really, my colleague Pat Rooney and I were talking about this when we were doing a podcast earlier. The the view of this game has changed so much from August to now, and it's gone various times. Like there was a point where the beginning of the season, it's like, well, Kansas is, one of the favorites in the conference. CU is not, and so it was like, well, Kansas should win that one. And then midway through the season, it's well, Kansas is 1-5, and Colorado is pretty darn good, so Colorado should win that. Now Kansas is playing like Kansas, and the Buffs are playing really well. So now all of a sudden, this looks like it's gonna be a really good football game.
Yeah, it should be a fun atmosphere, and that's kind of the crazy thing you talked about. The season seems like it's going so fast. Uh, I'll be honest that there were times when you're covering a losing team where you kind of dread the next game because it just
Yeah.
kind of there's the possibility for a lot more negativity in your life. And now it's like,
Mhm.
let's go. Let's get to Arrowhead Stadium. Let's get
Right.
there 2:30 in the afternoon. And I'm excited. Yeah, 55 degrees, it sounds like it's going to be like. And it should be a fun football game. The Big 12 in general has not been quite as good as I expected them to be, just as an overall group of opponents that the Buffs have faced. But
Yeah.
yeah, Kansas is playing good ball, so you got to show up and play well.
Yeah, they're one of those teams that was ranked preseason, but they're not now. But they're playing like it. I mean, I really think that over the last month or so, when you look at the top teams in the Big 12, I put Colorado at the top, and I'd probably put Arizona State and Kansas right there. You'd probably have to, you may have to put BYU up there. I don't know if they've played their best football in the last month, but Kansas to me would be one of the top three, four teams in the Big 12 over the last month.
Yeah, part of the issue was Jalen Daniels was turning the ball over early
Yeah.
this season,
Mhm.
and he's gotten better at that. And so you've seen that also result in Kansas playing better. And there were some bad bounces that went here and there. It's not like Kansas was as bad as they were record wise early this season. They weren't getting
Yeah.
blown out in a lot of games, right? So you kind of saw that potential. Lance Leipold is a really, really good coach,
Yeah.
and that that's what you would expect from a really well coached team is that you're going to get better as the season goes along, and that's been the case. But Colorado's played their best ball on the road outside of
Mhm.
that Nebraska game. So yeah, we'll get into our predictions later, but uh, you can focus in. I guess I'll say this: you shouldn't fear Kansas. You should respect them.
Yeah.
It-
Mhm.
but if you're Colorado, just do what you've been doing on the road here, the last few trips outside of Colorado, and you'll be just fine.
Yeah, we had a chance to do a Zoom. They did a Zoom with Travis and Shador earlier today. Shador was asked about, did you think all this was possible? Potentially the college football playoff and all that stuff. And Shador was very quick to say, our goal is the Big 12 title. That's what's been on the schedule all along, and now the rest will take care of itself. And he's like, if we don't win these games, we're not going to even win the Big 12 title. So, the point was that they know this is serious. I mean, they better show up this week, and that's kind of been. You and I talked about this earlier this week. You sort of asked that same question to, not sort of, you did ask that same question to Shiloh about how it seems like every time we talk to these players, they just seem locked in and focused. And the message we're hearing, the message that Shador shared this today on this Zoom was that, yeah, they're locked in. They know the seriousness of what's going on, and they know that really, if they're not successful this Saturday, all that other stuff could go out the window. And so I think they're going to show up ready to go because that's just what they've done for the last, really the last month plus, really. I mean, it probably goes beyond that, but at least the last month.
Yeah, this group probably would have gotten to this point just because there is so much veteran leadership on this team compared
Yeah.
to a year ago, especially like this is Shador's last go round at the college level. But maybe, last year what happened at Stanford, again, I don't know if this really factors into this team, but like if it does at all, it's that sense that like you really do have to put your nose down and
Mhm.
focus on the next thing in front of you. And it's that cliche, and media folks hate when a player says it's one game at a time. But this team has taken that mentality, like we've talked about before, Brian, and it's very evident. I was watching Mark Johnson do his coach's show this week, and he had Vincent Dancy on there, and he was just talking about this is just such a special group to be around. And
Mhm.
sometimes it's hard to put a finger on what makes a group cohesive and focused and do the right things. And Colorado has had some issues. They haven't got out to great starts in a lot of games this year, but
Yeah.
generally, uh, the body language, the confidence, the resiliency in this group has been so solid this season, and it's only seemingly getting better week after week.
Yeah, it really is. And Travis even mentioned, look, we know that any one of these teams can beat us, and so we better show up. And yeah, I think that's what makes this team special. And you're right. Maybe it's not the best quote, to hear from when they say, "Well, it's game to game," but at the same time, if you're a fan, that's what you want your team to say, and that's how you want them to feel. Is that it's game to game. You don't want Colorado to be thinking one thing about Oklahoma State right now, which is the opponent next week, or about being in Arlington in 2 weeks from now. So they got a big one against Kansas. And Adam, this is becoming a special season, isn't it? I mean, it's been so much fun to watch it develop into, August. It's like, man, what's this team going to be? We think they can be good. And then, obviously the trip up in Nebraska where you're like, oh boy, they, after Nebraska, I remember saying I was on a local radio show in Denver before the CSU game, and they asked me, "How big is this CSU game for Colorado?" And I said, "It's the season. If they don't win this game in Fort Collins, I think it's gonna be a really long season." I feel like that's when this season flipped for Colorado, is they were able to really bounce back from that. And Shador said that in the Zoom that we did with him today, that he said after that Nebraska game, when we bounced back from that, that's when we knew we were a good team. I think they've become a special team. I don't think they started out that way, but I think they've become one. They've had special players. I think they've become a special team over the last 6-7 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, we could spend the next hour just talking about guys that have stepped up big time at different moments. And
Yeah.
yeah, the focus is going to be on Shador Sanders and Travis Hunter, and uh, you know, largely that should be the case because of how special they are at both of their positions. Travis playing two positions, but the list of guys that have made plays for this team is so long that that's part of it, and I think the way this coaching staff has kind of gone about things, and even to the point of not filling up all 85 scholarships, because it's like we don't want a lot of dead weight on this roster. Like we want guys that are going to have a role in this team, so they're going to be in the locker room as a positive impact. Whether it's Herman Smith playing a bunch of special teams, guys like that have a role on this team, and you now see Keaton Wade get in there, and now he's not going to redshirt, and the list is so long, and so I think that's what it makes it a healthy locker room when you can have that many guys that have such a big impact on this team. And there's just so many hungry guys on this team, from the coaching staff on down through that locker room.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I'm going to give a shout out to a guy that we saw yesterday at practice, Ben Finnesseth, the walk-on safety, who we kind of joked with him as he walked by us. We've known him for a few years now. Like, I don't know where his energy comes from. When you watch him in the videos and on the sidelines, like, man, that guy is full of some energy, and he brings it
Yeah.
to special teams. And he's one of their special teams leaders. But it goes from everybody from Travis and Shador to guys like Ben Finnesseth, who's a walk-on, killing it on special teams. And so there's a lot of guys that have bought in, and yeah, they're not using all 70, not all 85 scholarships. They started below that, and they're way below it now because some attrition. They're maximizing what they have though, and finding the players saying, yeah, you're good here, and we'll go from there. And to the point that Keaton Wade, it was mentioned this week that the original plan was for him. When he first got on the field at Arizona, it was like, all right, that was nice, 11 snaps, couple sacks, and the plan was I'm going to kind of strategically play 4 games and keep my red shirt. Coach Prime mentions this week, no, he outplayed that plan. He's going to be with us, and so you got guys really stepping up this year that you didn't really plan on, or that most of us probably didn't expect to step up for this team.
I don't even know if Dayon Hayes doesn't go down. Do we see Keaton Wade at
Right.
all this year?
Hmm.
Uh, and this is a guy in Keaton Wade that had 22 pressures, according to Pro Football Focus last year at Kentucky.
Yeah.
So he came in, he would have been one of, I think, probably number two behind Jordan Dominic with that number in terms of pressures on Colorado's team had he done that in Boulder last year. So I guess it shouldn't surprise us, but you see Keaton Wade in a walking boot during camp, and you have these other guys, and Tajay McCoy is one of those guys that has flashed this year that's younger. And yeah, I had to do a double take look at my roster when he was out there and made his first play. And then since then, every time he's out there, you're almost keen on him because his impact to snap ratio is unbelievable.
Yeah, he's got like 4.5 tackles for loss, and I don't even think he's played 100 snaps yet this season. So it's crazy what he's done. But yeah, there's a lot of those types of guys, and frankly, they're going to need a lot of different guys on Saturday at Arrowhead because, like we said, Kansas is playing much better. What kind of keys do you think are for the Buffaloes this week going out to Kansas? Obviously, tough. Their run game. Devin Neal's one of the best running backs. They've seen a lot of good running backs in the Big 12. I think they've seen them all. Ollie Gordon is not having the great season that we thought he would. They'll see him next week, but I think they've seen almost all of the good running backs in the Big 12, and they've had some good results and some not good results at times. But what do you feel about this game this week?
Yeah, you got to stop the run, and
Yeah.
obviously that's beyond Neal. That's Jalen Daniels, who is a dual threat, and uh, Colorado has done a better job against the run in recent weeks and
Hmm.
against quarterbacks containing them. That was at times kind of an issue for this team earlier in the season, and so not reverting back to some of those issues defensively, I think will be the key. And it really does start up front because we've seen when that defensive line for Colorado is
Hmm.
performing up to their potential. Bonta Bentley and Hill Green are as good a linebacker duo as there is in the conference, and so that really frees them up. So that's going to be a key. Just that being able to keep those offensive linemen from getting to the second level to allow Neal to get deep and do some of the things that DJ Giddens is the first one that comes to mind of
Hmm.
just being able to kind of break some long runs and cause issues for Colorado's defense. So don't let that happen and get out to a better start offensively.
Yeah.
And that's something that Shador Sanders said post game of like, we can't keep doing this. We've got to get out of the gates better, and that's on me. And so he kind of took ownership of that. And so seeing Shador Sanders go out there and put up some long drives in that first quarter to keep Kansas from really reveling in that spoiler mentality that they've had recently, I think are the main things that stand out to me. But if
Yeah.
Colorado goes out there and plays their game, they should win this football game.
Yeah, I agree with you. And one thing on the run game, by the way, there's a lot been made of they held Utah to 31 yards. I didn't realize this until I was looking at things after the game. Utah had 21 of those yards uh, in the last 2 minutes when they put the backups out there, and CU's backup defense was there. There's like 4 carries for 21 yards, including 13 on the very last play of the game. So really, the first team defense held Utah to 10 rushing yards on 26 carries, which is insane. And I did even more. Like the middle 22 carries of the game, Utah had like negative 10 yards. So
Wow.
it was insane what they did against the run. Yes, DJ Giddens got loose against them. Taj Brooks late in that game, although
I
those
don't even really count that. It felt like that game was
right.
kind of out of reach at
It
that
was
point.
out of reach, and Coach Prime pointed that out, and he was right. In the meat of the game, when Texas Tech was needing to run the ball, and the Buffs were when the game was in doubt a little bit, they stuffed the run. He got his yards late when the Buffs were kind of backing off and guarding against the pass. But yeah,
And they did a great job against RJ Harvey too, who
yeah,
continues to lead the conference in rushing. So
yeah,
yeah, again, it's not that Colorado's rush defense is been poor this season. It just if you're talking about a key going into this game, if you're able to have the success you had against an RJ Harvey
hmm,
and a Utah, like you're going to win this going away. It's the kind of that concern. Just don't let it go back to what we saw against Kansas State.
Well, and the other thing is, Jalen Daniels is more of that running quarterback, which in the past has hurt the Buffs a lot. We haven't seen that as much this year. Who's the kid from North Dakota State? Cam Miller, and Sawyer Robinson from Baylor early in the season had some. I think they both had 80 plus yards on the ground against the Buffs, but other than that, now they haven't seen a ton of running quarterbacks. I know that, but KJ Jefferson didn't do it a ton against them. Avery Johnson didn't hardly run the ball at all against them, so they've done a good job. So I agree with you. That's a huge key, stopping the run. I think the fast start. I think you hit it. I think that's a big key too. I didn't think it was that big of a deal last week because Utah, I don't think was going to score enough to win that game. Kansas can. I mean, Kansas has put up over 40 points at home in the last two games at home. So the Buffs have got to get off to a good start. Shedeur can't throw an interception on the first play of the game. Yeah, you got to avoid that. But yeah, I like the Buffs in this one. Should we go ahead and do predictions at this point?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, I'm going Buffs 31-28. I think it's gonna be a really good football game. I know they've 4 games in a row they beat teams by 11 plus points. They're very capable of doing that again. I just think Kansas right now, to go back to your original point, you don't have to fear them, but you got to respect them. I think that they're playing good enough football right now. They're going to stay in this game, especially at Arrowhead. But I got the Buffs winning at 31-28.
Yeah, well, coach team you're going up against on the road, and like you said earlier, Brian, that you talk about the teams that are playing the best in this conference. You put Colorado probably at the top of that list, and right there you've got Kansas and Arizona State, and so
Mm-hmm.
they're playing good football. They're well coached, but Colorado, outside of some slow starts coming out of those buys at the beginning of the season, they have just started to play so much more consistent football, especially defensively. And that first defensive stand that they had against Utah after the interception said a lot about that group's mentality and kind
Yeah.
of what we can expect, I think, out of them in the month of November here going forward and into December as well. So I see Colorado going out there and going toe to toe and winning this game. A similar margin. I'm going to give Colorado a few more points. I'm going to go 35 for Colorado, 24 for Kansas.
Isn't it funny how that defense has almost become the identity of this team? Obviously Shedeur and Travis are the faces of this team, but nationally, I think that's the narrative that I'm seeing is a lot of people are like, "Ooh, these guys actually are physical. They can hit you, and they'll play some defense." And I loved. I don't know if you caught this. I'm sure you rewatched the game, but right before the opening kickoff, Jenny Taft from Fox chats with Coach Prime. She says, "How do you get a match up with Utah's physicality?" He goes, "What about ours? What about our
Yeah.
physicality?" He goes, "We're the team that leads the conference in sacks, right?" And then they go out and show their physicality once again. That's one of those things that I think makes this team special, Adam, is that there's some things that don't travel, whether it's basketball, football, things like that. Physicality travels, and
Mhm.
mentality travels. And this team is almost better on the road. They bring that mentality, and we keep asking it after these road games against like Texas Tech when tortillas are flying at them and things like that. And people are like, "Well, how do you handle that?" And their response is, "Well, if people don't hate us, we're uncomfortable. we don't know what it's like when people don't hate us." And so they want it. Kansas fans, they want that. They want you to hate them. Go hate on them. So watch Kansas fans come out and shower them with love and try the opposite thing. But yeah, that's a mentality. This team that travels on the road really well. That's what I like about this team more than anything is that they've got an attitude now that we have not seen in a while. I don't think we saw it early in the year either. I think we've seen it really in the last 2 months.
It's funny. I was doing a radio interview with the Kansas station this morning, and they were talking about guys outside of Shador and Travis, guys to keep an eye on for Jayhawk fans. And I said, I didn't know who Nikai Hill Green was a year ago at this point. No
Yeah.
offense to his stint at Michigan and Charlotte. I'm pretty locked in on this Colorado beat. I just didn't know who that was. And now all of a sudden, I'm looking at him as being, a top 3, 4 pick in the NFL and kind of going, I'm really going to miss him. Like
Yeah.
those hits that he makes,
Yeah.
we can hear up in the Folsom Field press box because we get the windows open there. You can just hear those tackles up there. Like there have been very few players that have come through Colorado where you can say that about.
Yeah. And I agree with you. And for me, the one I think that's the most common question, by the way, that I get when I do radio appearances out of town is almost every one of them. There's two things that are most common on out of town radio. The lead in song is going to be Rocky Mountain High by John Denver. And I'm going to get the question, who besides Shador and Travis should we be looking out for?
Yeah, yeah,
The first one I typically say is Cam Sim and Craig, because,
yeah,
yeah, and I wrote about him yesterday that to me, he's the defensive MVP of this team. I think that he's been so good from start to finish, and I didn't expect him to be that good, especially when he came out last year, not a starter to start the 2023 season. He gets that job in week 2 and has not let it go. He's been unbelievable, and to me, he's played himself into the NFL as well. And the impact he makes, you can feel and hear that as well. And so the attitude comes from him and Nikai Hill Green, and Levante Bentley has some hits too that you're like, ooh, man. And
yeah.
you know, it used to be kind of like Shiloh was a big hitter, and he's still a big hitter. I'm not sure he's not the fourth best hitter on that team because Nikai Hill Green, Levante Bentley will hit you hard. And so that's what's
Yeah.
fun about this defense is they've got multiple guys on this team. Amari McNeil, by the way he's hitting guys lately,
Ooh.
that's up there as well too. So it's gonna be a lot of fun to watch these
Amari
guys this
has
week. Yeah.
Amari has unlocked beast mode here in the last couple weeks. It's been pretty
Yeah.
impressive. It's funny too, going back to your point about national interviews. I don't know if you feel this way. You start talking about receivers, and it's like you got to carve out a whole segment for
Right.
this
Right.
because it's like then you go into LaJonte, but you can't forget about Will Shepherd, and then you got to
Yeah.
bring up Jimmy Horn and his injury status.
Yeah.
It is again going back to an earlier point. There are just so many guys on this team that have made such a big impact that you. I don't know about you, Brian. There's a part of nervousness about these next 2 weeks because of what is at stake,
Yeah.
but not nervousness because I don't think this team is going to take care of business.
Yeah, I agree with you. Another guy we haven't even mentioned him, BJ Green, is having an unbelievable season for this
Yeah,
team,
yeah,
by the way. So yeah, I agree with you. That I feel a little bit nervous as well, but not about this team. I think I feel confident what they can do. It's more of what's this going to look like, and partially because the Big 12 has been so crazy that just when you think you
yeah,
know what's happening in the Big 12, there's results that happen. You're like, wow, that just changed everything I thought about the Big 12. So
yeah.
hopefully that's not one of those this week in Kansas City. I'm looking forward to the trip. We're gonna get some barbecue. Hopefully go to the Negro Leagues Museum on Friday. Should be a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to it.
I am too. Yeah, we'll see you out there in Kansas City, Brian.
Awesome. Thanks, Adam.